Hello there everybody, this is Krista and welcome back to Crochet Witch Tarot. Today we are doing tarot and ADHD thoughts in the car. I should start leaving before people see me talking to myself. So I wanted to do this talk in the car. One, because we've got people doing work in our house, so I wasn't confident. Whoa! Should have thought that would happen. Wasn't confident I'd be able to film something. And don't worry, we're being safe. 10 and 2, eyes on the road. And I've just really been thinking about this topic again. And wanted to be able to share my thoughts today. And I figure, what better than the car ride home, right? So we're leaving work currently. Anyway, so what I have been thinking about and reading, really like learning and reading about, is the positive aspects of ADHD. Because as I feel like I've probably mentioned before, I feel like a lot of information out there and a lot of the things, you start learning about with a diagnosis is negative, and how to deal with like the way it negatively impacts your life, which is very important to do, absolutely. But I feel like sometimes I get really caught up in that and forget that with a neurodivergency, it truly, it's how your brain is formed, it's how your brain works. So it doesn't seem possible to me that it could be only negatives and that the only conversation to have around it is negative. So I started doing some research. We have this wonderful book I got for the library. It's a children's book, but honestly recommend for anyone. It's called ADHD is My Superpower. And right away, what a magical thought that is, I think. And I've been reading a lot about the positive aspects of having an ADHD brain and how, in a lot of ways, it really can be a superpower. One of those ways is that, according to my reading, people who have ADHD are very naturally creative. A word that was really interesting to me that came up a lot in this conversation was cognitive expansion or expansive. I was repeating the word over and over to myself before I left work, and it's already gone. Cognitive expansion, I believe, is what the term was. And what that is talking about is the ability to have one starting point of a thought and expand it into many different directions. So that's not to say that someone who is neurotypical doesn't do that. But the usual line of thinking is you have an original thought, and the way it expands is one step forward to one other thought. But when it comes to, that's a weird angle we got, when it comes to an ADHD brain, there is a spark of a thought, and your mind could be going many different directions at once. Many different possibilities, seemingly at once, very quickly, if not at once. Which can be overwhelming, and absolutely is the whole thing around inattentiveness. But I thought it was really cool to think of it in that way or see it in that way, because I do think there is a lot of truth in it of how that expands creativity. And that was really interesting to me. What were my other thoughts on this? Oh, so this kind of lends itself to things like quick problem solving, new ideas, a willingness to work through mistakes. I think that's a real big one. And just while reading through these things, I feel like I saw a lot of these traits in myself. And I mean, for one, it felt really nice to be reading these positive traits when it comes to ADHD and being able to see that in myself. I thought that was really just refreshing, you know? And so that got me thinking, because I really enjoy this series of relating my work with tarot back to the way my brain works. And so it got me thinking about how this might show up in my current tarot practice, or how I can lean into it a little bit more. Hello! How I can lean into this idea to even better suit my practice to myself. And something interesting that, again, I was also reading and thinking about was that, because, you know, again, with all these topics, there comes the idea of masking. So while I was thinking about, okay, like, yeah, I really do have an easy time problem solving, pivoting, and creating new ideas very quickly. And I do think that's a real skill set of mine, but I know there are times where I kind of squelch that, where I don't feel like it's appropriate for whatever reason, or I don't really feel like people are looking for my ideas or advice, which, you know, that is legitimate sometimes for sure. But that is a form of masking, I think, anyway. So just thinking on that idea and sort of just what happens if, you know, I have this innate ability to have and come up with all these different ideas at once. What happens when I try and just do the one thought to one thought thing? And what I was reading is that it's possible that attempting to, and it makes sense, attempting to do that really can, oh boy. This is gonna be a real interesting video, huh? Anyway, doing that can exacerbate ADHD symptoms, which I think makes a lot of sense. You are trying to force your brain to work in a way it does not naturally do so, which is going to be stressful and I don't even know if symptoms is the right word, but make certain traits much more apparent, I guess is what you could say. I thought that was really, really interesting. And so how I think I related that to my own tarot practice, or possibilities for my tarot practice, is, you know, are there times that I am sort of boxing myself into certain ways of using tarot, using certain tarot decks for certain things? And I do think that happens sometimes, and it never works for me. Sometimes I'm persistent and stubborn about it, though. And I thought a really fun relation that I made for myself when it comes to all this, in terms of letting myself be creative, is when it comes to my tarot and oracle pairings. So there are many times where I get caught up in having specific pairings for one tarot deck and one oracle deck and being like, okay, they go together. But as of late, I've really been trying to not do that. I totally see how that works for some people, but I just recognized that it was more stressing me out than anything else, and I didn't know why. And so my initial reasoning was that I wanted all of my decks to feel usable in any way that I wanted to, and be a little bit more universal. What's the word I'm thinking of? And adaptable is not the right word, but it's a synonym of adaptable. Can't think of it. And so that was initially why I attempted to kind of change my habits around that. But in reading about this, I recognized that what I was also doing was allowing myself to be more creative and not... Why do I have the word squelch in my vocabulary right now? What a weird word. But not trying to, I guess, push that part of myself down and force myself into a one-track mind, because a one-track mind is not something I'm really ever going to truly have. The closest I will probably ever get is hyper-focus, but even within that, I'm bouncing in all different directions. Anyway, so I recognized that this was really allowing my creative mind to work, and it's something I have found so much joy in. Getting to pair my tarot and oracle decks in maybe ways that are expected that make sense, or really unexpected ways, and seeing how they work together in readings, or even aesthetically how they just look together, and it's been so much fun. And this week, if you saw my weekly deck selection video, instead of picking out 2 tarot and 2 oracle decks, which is a practice I started because I was starting to feel some deck overwhelm. And it's been helpful for a time, and I do think I still like that process. This is not to say that I'm not going to do that again. But for this week, I really got in the mood of wanting to of allowing myself wider access, I suppose, to different decks. And so what I've done is, it's not my whole collection, but I've narrowed it down to what fits into my little tarot crib that I keep next to my reading desk. So it's a lot more than just kind of 2 options for each, basically. And I have gotten so much joy and have had so much fun with it that I think it's something that could really, really work for me. And again, it's this whole recognizing that I am allowing myself much more freedom to be creative with something that I really love. And it's not making me feel any sort of overwhelm. Honestly, I think the overwhelm wasn't from anything around number of decks, how many decks are coming in at once. I think it was just not... I think it just came from comparing myself and not allowing myself to just have the habits that are comfortable and feel fun and good to me. And so I've really gotten to a space that I'm able to kind of think and be that way, which has been really exciting as well. We're veering into a lot of topics here. My apologies if this doesn't make sense. But allowing myself to be creative. And beyond that, even get creative with how my readings work. Like, do I want my reading to center around the tarot deck today, or do I want it to center around the oracle deck today? And choosing based on that thought. And it has totally opened up how I use my decks in such a fun way. And it's a cool feeling to get to credit that, at least a little bit, to my neurodivergent brain, which I don't know. Gosh, I feel like that makes me giddy to say, because I don't take enough time to tell myself that I'm doing something good, and it's all due to that, you know? I feel like I had another point in that sentence. I can't think of it. So, maybe I should just wrap up this thought. I feel like I'm just going in circles. All in all, the interesting thing I've been looking into is the ways in which having an ADHD brain, or even I don't even want to necessarily specify that is the lens that I am looking into, but I do wonder if it's really any kind of neurodivergency. I don't know, honestly. I know the cognitive expansion. I feel like that's not the right term. I know that was very connected to ADHD, because it's all about like your brain being able to naturally your brain going multiple different places at once. But still, like I do wonder if it can be, this thought is more universal. Anyway, so the thing I've been looking into is, one, how my ADHD can be my superpower. And it led me to one of the really big ways is having this unique sense of creativity, where I can think outside of the box. You know, I'm not so afraid to take risks because I do make mistakes a lot. I'm willing to make mistakes because I'm so used to making mistakes. And seeing it in that way is really cool, because it's something I've grown up being so embarrassed about, how often I just make really simple and silly mistakes. But it really has made me immune to caring about making mistakes. Not I'm totally immune, but for the most part, I can brush it off really easily. So I'm not so afraid to try new things, because if I make a mistake or it doesn't go right, I'll just try again like I always do. And what I've realized through this lens of ADHD and creativity is that I've naturally started shaping my tarot practice around that. In that, I just had I trusted my feelings, went along with my feeling of wanting access to more of my decks at once during the week. And I do like the practice of picking 2 tarot and 2 oracle, because I feel like I'm spending time with those decks. However, there definitely are times where it feels limiting, and I don't know the right way to word this. Limiting in a sense of, I guess sometimes it feels like, okay, I'm gonna use this deck because, well, I picked this one, so I have to. And that's not a thought I want to have. And I try not to have it. I don't say that that's one that happens a lot, but sometimes it does. And so this method for this week of giving myself the wider array of tarot decks and oracle decks has really been activating that creativity in a way that is so much fun for me, and I feel like really brings out what I love about tarot and oracle, and has just been really positive. So I wanted to just kind of share what I've been learning and just share this positive thought with you all, because I try and learn about the negatives, I guess you could say. Learn about them and think for myself, how can I shape these into a positive habit for myself? How can I integrate this knowledge in a positive way? But learning about something that is already originally presented as positive was really refreshing and really cool. So I wanted to share that with you all on my ride home from work. But I will stop talking in circles now. I hope this was enjoyable. I've made it home safely. This was not distracted driving, I swear. But okay, I think that is all I have to say. So other than that, we're turning down the road. I hope you are all having a wonderful week so far, and I'll see you again soon.